burnout to me is different than being tired. Tired is I need to rejuvenate, but I'm ready to go, baby. I just need a little bit of rest and I'm still fired up for the work. What I found from a lot of teachers is they still love teaching. They love instructing, but they can't do it in that environment anymore. And I think that's burnout in the sense of, I think that's exhaustion from their environment, and it's also burnout as well. But it's burnout that's driving the teacher to go, I don't want to do this in this environment, but if you get me out of that environment, here's what teachers are telling me. Oh, I'd love to still instruct on some level. So it's like it's diving into what's causing the burnout. And I think it's a lack of meaning and purpose. I think it's a toxic environment. It could be a whole host of things. I'm just curious what you think of that.
Well, let me just say broadly, yes, to everything that you just said. So we do mostly focus on burnout because the largest study that we've done on burnout, which actually predated the pandemic, is when you look at the actual drivers. I think there's a lot of confusion among leaders about what are the actual drivers of burnout. Because when you posit that question to them and say, what do you think it is? Most of the time they think it's exhaustion that's causing it. And they're correct. It is one of the top 5 things that causes burnout. But the single greatest contributor to burnout is perceived unfair treatment.
Yeah.
So this is a very key thing. And when you unpack perceived unfair treatment, there are a number of things. I mean, we see that there are massive issues around equity that still exist in the workplace. And it's not just issues of equity, of pay. It's also issues around opportunities. Do people get the exact same opportunities internally? But the other massive one is this issue around who is carrying the workload. Because stars, if there's anything that drives them absolutely nuts, is when they think that there is another individual in the organization that does not carry their weight. And that frustration is something that they share with their colleagues and that they'll share with their manager. And if a manager isn't fully equipped to deal with a particular issue like that, it makes everyone incredibly disengaged. But I want to make one other comment. Because this distinction that you point out is really fascinating, because there's another element, which is, do people have the opportunity to do what they do best every single day? Because when somebody is in an environment where they are able to use their strengths, they actually gain energy from it.
Yes.
And although even if you do have the opportunity to use your strengths, yes, you may still feel exhausted. And everybody has a right to feel exhausted, especially if they're working hard. But when you're able to have the opportunity to do what you do best, you're actually doing what you do best, then you can actually go into what Csikszentmihalyi says is flow.
Yes.
You can work far more hours because these are things that just come completely naturally to you. So that's why I think it's so important for managers to individualize to the people that they work with on how do we set people up for success and give them the ability to do what they do best.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said it that way. That's beautiful, because that's the whole point. I can be really tired when I go home and I disengage from work and I'm a husband and a dad and a dog dad and all the things. And I'm fired up the next morning because I'm coming in and I'm doing what I'm good at. I'm doing what I love, and I'm producing results that matter deeply to me. As I call that, the sweet spot. I mean, that's just where we're wired to be. And yet we just, leaders seem to miss this. And can I also just get your take on this? I'm so sick of hearing the old phrase, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. I just think it's absolutely a crock of crap, because I think you work harder. And to your point, you care deeper, which means you work harder, and then you're able to go at a higher pace. Can we just put that stupid saying to rest? It sounds wonderful, but I think it's misleading.
Thank you for bringing that up. So in Gallup's Global State of the Workplace that we launched earlier this year, that very issue is what I took issue with in the opening letter, which is I referred to it as a false workplace proverb.
Yeah.
Because saying to people, do what you love and you'll never work a day again in your life, is completely false.
That's
even
right.
Those people who are totally in flow, they're thriving at work, even they experience stress, even they sometimes even experience some pain, because the very definition of work, which I think if you look it up in Webster's, is something along the lines of some sort of physical or mental resistance in order to accomplish something. You are going to feel some kind of strain or stress, but of course, in that particular context, that's when you grow as an individual. That's when you accomplish something as an individual. So take teachers, for example. Teaching a classroom, even if you're fully engaged, even if you're thriving at work, can be a difficult environment. If you have 20 to 25 young people,
That's right.
There are going to be tough days.
Yeah.
So we can't live in this notion that you'll never work a day again in your life, because the very definition of work is to have this physical and sometimes mental strain in order to accomplish something.
Yeah. We talk a lot about talent in our circles, obviously. Gallup, the foremost leader on strengths. And then a lot of people in my space, influencers, like to poo-poo the word passion. They think it's fun and it's clickbaity, and they go, "Oh, don't follow your passion," which I agree. I think that is misguided if that's the only indicator. You got to have the talent to pull it off. But, the root word for passion, which I use that word when I talk about work that you love, a task or a role that you look forward to. And when you get in it, man, time stands still and you get that energy because you're operating in that zone. But the root word for passion is to suffer. And I just find that most successful men and women, and we're talking about this idea, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life being a bunch of crap. This idea that when we do something we love, you think of a craftsman, John. I mean, they suffer. You suffer failure. You suffer rejection. You suffer patience. Hello? I mean, for entrepreneurs, patience is the hardest thing in the world. That is a form of suffering. But you do it because you love the work and you care about the outcome. We just tend to gloss over that a lot, don't we?
Maybe. Sometimes when I think of the word suffer, it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody who is doing some kind of excruciating work to achieve a particular outcome. Maybe. I mean,
no. I'm not saying that the work is excruciating. I'm saying like there's the idea of suffering. There's a passion, meaning that what you have to go through. And again, it may just be perseverance. It may be failure. It may be, right, I've got to go through arduous training to get where I want to go. My point is leaders overlook how much somebody loves something. And when you get them in that role that they love that work, they're going to have resilience. They're going to stick with it.
I do agree with that. I prefer the word struggle, because I think when somebody is trying to figure out complex algorithms, if an engineer is trying to build something, they're struggling in order to figure out the outcome. And as I mentioned before, with that struggle comes growth. And so I do think that struggle can be a very positive thing.
Yeah.
I think what the point is, though, is that the misery in the workplace that many are currently experiencing is that we will never have an absence of struggle.
Right.
But the misery cannot be the soul of the job.
That's right.
And right now, for far too many, because of perceived unfair treatment of work, because of feeling totally ignored, because you have leaders who poorly communicate to many of those individuals, they are forced to suffer as opposed to struggle in a positive way to get the meaningful development and outcomes that are best for the workplace.
That's absolutely right. I think there's too much focus on procedural decisions and not relational. I think relational is going to give you the procedural. That's what I take away from this.